For decades, if you thought about the brains of your computer, you were thinking about one name, Intel. They were a titan, a king, an institution that just seemed unbeatable. But now, that king is in the fight of its life.
So you gotta wonder, right? How does a company that was basically invincible just stumble? It's an amazing story, really. It's about how a giant fell and how it's now betting absolutely everything on a comeback. Let's get into it. How did the ruler of the chip world lose its crown?
Okay, so to really get what went wrong, you first have to understand just how powerful they were. Think of Intel's business as this impenetrable fortress, and that fortress was built on two massive, incredibly strong pillars that pretty much locked everyone else out for decades.
So pillar number one was something called the x86 architecture. The easiest way to think about it is like this. It was the one and only language that personal computers spoke. For, well, forever, really. Microsoft Windows was written for x86. So that created this huge wall. If you wanted to build a computer that ran Windows, you had no choice. You had to use an x86 chip. And guess who owned that playground? Yep, Intel.
And the second pillar? Moore's Law. You've probably heard of it. Now for Intel, this wasn't just some abstract idea. It was their playbook. It was their whole business model. They were so good at manufacturing that they were Moore's Law in action, constantly churning out chips that were way more powerful and cheaper than anything the competition could dream of. And this created this incredible self-feeding cycle, you know? Better chips meant more money, which meant they could research and build even better chips. It was a winning machine.
So you have this fortress, right? It seems totally unbeatable. How on earth does something like that start to fall apart? Well, the cracks started to appear in the very foundation of what made them great, their manufacturing.
It's kind of ironic, really. The core problem was that the very company that basically wrote the book on Moore's Law suddenly couldn't keep up with it. Their manufacturing started to stumble, there were delays, their new chips weren't as good, and that opened the door. It led a rival, TSMC, that's Taiwan Semiconductor, to not just catch up, but to blow right past them.
And the damage from this was just severe. I mean, analysts at Morningstar, who, by the way, used to say Intel had a wide economic moat, which is basically business speak for an impenetrable fortress, they downgraded them. Not just a little bit. They went from wide moat all the way down to no moat. Zero. The fortress walls were officially down.
And when those walls came down, the competition just flooded in. Intel's old rival AMD saw their chance. They teamed up with the new manufacturing king, TSMC, and started making chips that were flat out better than Intel's. And then, Apple. Apple did something that was just unthinkable a few years prior. They dumped Intel completely and started designing their own incredible chips for their Mac computers. It was a massive blow.
So, what do you do when your kingdom is crumbling? Intel is facing a legitimate do-or-die threat, and their answer isn't to just patch up the holes in the walls. Oh no. They're trying to redesign the entire kingdom from the ground up with a really bold, incredibly high-stakes gamble.
And this plan is a total 180, a complete pivot. Instead of only making their own chips, they want to become what's called a foundry. Think of it as a state-of-the-art factory for hire. They want to build the best chips in the world for other companies. And yeah, that could even mean building chips for their biggest rivals. Wild, right?
But the potential prize here is absolutely massive. If they can pull this off, analysts think this foundry business could be bringing in something like $15 billion a year by 2030. It's a huge bet, but it's really an attempt to take their biggest weakness, manufacturing, and turn it back into their greatest strength.
And this plan is so big, so ambitious, and honestly so important for chip manufacturing in the US that it's getting some major backup. We're talking about the US government, big-time investors like SoftBank, and even, get this, their rival NVIDIA. All of them are putting billions of dollars on the table to help Intel make this happen.
So you've got this wild plan. You've got billions of dollars in backing. But the $1 billion question remains. Can they actually do it? Can they pull it off? And this, right here, is where you find the experts are completely split.
All right, let's look at the bull case, the folks who are optimistic. They're saying, hey, hold on, don't count Intel out just yet. They still own a huge chunk of the PC and server market. Their chip design team, still world-class. And maybe most importantly, they're one of only like 3 companies on the entire planet that even has the chops to try and build these next-generation chips.
But then you have the bears, the pessimists, and they see a very different picture. They're basically saying, look, there is no guarantee they can actually execute the super complex manufacturing roadmap. Plus, AMD isn't the scrappy underdog anymore. They're a serious threat. The whole ARM-based chip revolution is a huge problem for Intel. And maybe the biggest issue of all, in the new world of AI chips, NVIDIA isn't just winning, they're completely dominating. Intel's barely even in the game.
So you weigh the huge comeback plan, the legacy strengths, against all these really serious threats. Where do we land? What's the final verdict here?
Well, if you look at the Morningstar analysis, it's pretty fascinating. The stock market seems to be buying the comeback story big time. The stock price is trading way higher than what the analysts think the company is actually worth based on, its actual performance. And whenever you see a huge gap like that, it screams one thing: a very high level of uncertainty. Nobody really knows what's going to happen.
And this right here really puts the whole challenge into perspective. Remember that economic moat we talked about? Well, Intel has none. Zero protection. Meanwhile, rivals like AMD and NVIDIA, they have one. And then you look at the money, the market caps. Intel is just a fraction of the size of its competitors now, especially when you look at the AI behemoth NVIDIA. It's stark. The former king is now, without a doubt, the underdog.
So at the end of the day, Intel is making one of the biggest, riskiest, and most expensive bets in the history of business. This is a fight for its own survival, sure, but it's also a fight for relevance and even for the future of high-tech manufacturing in America. The outcome? It is completely up in the air. Which leaves us with that one big final question. Is this how the king reclaims the throne, or is the reign well and truly over?